Omega-3 cannot control this type of inflammation, non-enzymatic oxidation, producing reactive oxygen species. From Dr. Cate Shanahan with Dr. Shawn Baker.
So omega-6 refers to the chemical composition of these things. Like it has its first double bond, 6 carbons in from the end. And omega-3s have their first double bond, 3 carbons in from the end. So the omega-6s are supposedly the more pro-inflammatory, and the omega-3s are supposedly the more anti-inflammatory. And I say supposedly because it's not 100% like that. But the truth is that they do have opposing actions. And so in any kind of stress or alteration that the body undergoes, to get back to homeostasis, we have forces from both directions, right? So if we eat a candy bar or an apple or something, our blood sugar goes up and we have insulin pushing it back down, but we have what they call the counter-regulatory hormones pushing it back up, because insulin by itself might push it down too far. And then so you have to have the counter-regulatory hormones. And so you need the anti-inflammatory and the pro-inflammatory also to occur, so that, like, for example, if you prick your finger or something like that, you don't bleed forever and ever. So you need the pro-inflammatory there so that you stop bleeding, because it's a pro-inflammatory forms the clot. But you also need the anti-inflammatory so that that little clot doesn't spread throughout your body. So the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is talked about very, very often. It's very important because we've been eating a lot of soy and corn that have just so much more omega-6 and very little omega-3. And when we're eating animal fats for our source of omega-3, like fish and seal and other animals that were naturally grazed, or like these days, like game animals, many of them have more omega-3 than omega-6. So we're way out of balance on that. But one of the crazy things about this is that it's not just that these things are bad because of the omega-6 to 3 ratio and the pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory, because that inflammation doesn't occur it's like not for nothing, like they say in The Sopranos. There's something has to happen for that kind of inflammatory cascade to be a problem. The inflammation that I like to bring into the conversation that is a bigger problem is the not biologically functional. They call it non-enzymatic oxidation. And it's just the reaction of the fact that these things are literally unstable, and they tend to just spontaneously not combust, but close to it. They react with oxygen and iron and other metals in our bloodstream and cause free radical cascades and reactive oxygen species. And that leads to inflammation that cannot be controlled with omega-3. So that's kind of like the key missing piece. This kind of inflammation, omega-3 makes it worse. So you can't control this kind of problem by supplementing with fish oil or any kind of omega-3, right? So that's a whole other category of biochemical disaster that just not enough folks are talking about. And I just feel it's so important for everyone to understand this. Everybody talks about inflammation and using antioxidants and controlling inflammation. But if we aren't talking about the number one source of inflammation, we're not talking sense.
Omega-6 has its first double bonds 6 carbons in from the end. Omega-3 has its first double bonds 3 carbons in. Omega-6 are more pro-inflammatory. Omega-3 are more anti-inflammatory. It's not quite 100%, but they do have opposing actions. Any kind of stress the body faces, in order to get back to homeostasis, we have forces from both directions. For example, eat a candy bar or apple, your blood sugar goes up, and insulin pushes it back down. But we have to have a counter-regulatory hormone pushing it back up. Otherwise, insulin alone might push it down too far. We need the anti-inflammatory and the pro-inflammatory to occur. For example, you prick your finger, you don't want to bleed forever. You need pro-inflammatory to stop the bleeding, forming the clot. Also, we need anti-inflammatory, Also, we need anti-inflammatory to keep the clot from spreading. Omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is very important. We've been eating so much soy and corn, so much more omega-6 and so little omega-3. When we eat animal fats for our omega-3, like fish and other animals, wild caught and naturally grazed, they have more omega-3 than omega-6. It is not just because of the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio and the pro and anti-inflammatory issues. Something has to happen for that kind of inflammatory cascade to be a problem. The kind of inflammation most critical is not biologically functional. It is something called nonenzymatic oxidation. It's unstable. It tends to spontaneously nearly combust. It reacts with the oxygen and iron in the blood to cause free radical cascades and reactive oxygen species, leading to inflammation that cannot be controlled with omega-3. This is a whole other category of biochemical disaster. People talk about using antioxidants, but what we need to focus on is avoiding the number one source of this type of inflammation. Annotated and summarized, easy to share with loved ones. The description below the title for this video has these summary points.